The report from Iron Mountain. In 1967, a document surfaced that the U.S. government immediately and forcefully denied creating. Titled The Report from Iron Mountain, it was presented as a classified government study examining what would happen to American society if permanent peace broke out. The conclusion was chilling. War, the study argued, was not a failure of civilization. It was its foundation. Without war, the economy would collapse, social hierarchies would dissolve, and governments would lose their primary mechanism of control. The government called it a hoax. Its alleged author, a think tank scholar, later claimed he wrote it as satire. But the document's internal logic, its clinical tone, its bureaucratic precision led historians, economists, and political scientists to debate its authenticity for decades. It was pulled from shelves in certain libraries. Distribution was quietly discouraged. And the ideas inside it that war is manufactured, that peace is suppressed, remain as explosive today as they were in 1967. The Anarchist Cookbook. Published in 1971, William Powell's manual was not written by a criminal. It was written by a 19-year-old protesting the Vietnam War. Filled with instructions for homemade devices and drug synthesis, the book was never formally banned in the United States, but it was systematically removed from libraries, flagged by the FBI, and used as evidence in prosecutions for decades. What makes the story more complicated, Powell himself spent the last years of his life trying to have the book taken out of print. He had changed his views. The publisher refused. Under U.S. copyright law, he didn't own the rights anymore. The book outlived its author's wishes. The FBI built files on anyone who purchased it. And the ideas it represented, that young Americans had the right to resist their government by any means, were treated as a national security threat. The protocols and the suppression of dangerous forgeries. In the early 20th century, a document circulated across the United States and Europe, claiming to be a blueprint for world domination by a secret Jewish council. It was called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It was a proven forgery fabricated by the Russian secret police in the early 1900s. And yet, Henry Ford had it printed in his newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, reaching over 700,000 American readers. The U.S. did not ban it. Other nations did. In some countries, possession was criminalized. The irony is stark. The United States refused to suppress a document that incited mass violence while aggressively suppressing texts that challenged economic power. What a government chooses to silence reveals everything about what it is actually protecting. The cancer cure that worked. Barry Lines. In the 1930s, a San Diego inventor named Royal Raymond Rife developed a high-magnification microscope and what he claimed was a resonant frequency device capable of destroying cancer cells without harming surrounding tissue. Medical researchers who reportedly observed his demonstrations described results they couldn't explain. Then, the American Medical Association moved in. Rife's lab was raided. His equipment was confiscated or destroyed. His collaborators were discredited or prosecuted, and Rife himself died in obscurity. Decades later, Barry Lines documented the entire case in a book that became one of the most contested alternative medicine texts in American publishing history. Medical authorities dismissed it. Distributors were pressured. Copies were confiscated during FDA raids on alternative health clinics. Whether Rife's device worked is still debated. What is not debated is that his research was systematically dismantled, and that the book documenting that dismantling was treated with the same hostility. The fluoride deception. Christopher Bryson. Fluoride is in the water supply of most American cities. For decades, it has been presented as a straightforward public health benefit, safe, proven, and uncontroversial. Christopher Bryson's exhaustively sourced book told a different story. Drawing on declassified government documents, he argued that the push to fluoridate American water was partly rooted in Cold War-era industrial interests, specifically the need to manage public perception around fluoride as an industrial byproduct and weapons program waste. The book was not banned, but it was aggressively reviewed out of credibility, ignored by mainstream press, and dismissed before most Americans ever heard of it. Bryson's sources were government records, not theories. The documents existed. The questions remained open. The conversation was shut down before it started. Behold, a pale horse Milton William Cooper. Few books in modern American conspiracy literature have been as simultaneously mocked and obsessively read. William Cooper, a former U.S. Naval Intelligence officer, published a text alleging government foreknowledge of UFO contact, shadow governance structures, and plans for population control hidden inside classified annexes to national security directives. The FBI placed Cooper on a watch list. he was surveilled for years. In 2001, weeks after predicting a major terrorist attack on American soil, an attack he named Osama bin Laden, as the likely architect, he was killed in a confrontation with sheriff's deputies outside his Arizona home. Whether Cooper's claims were accurate, exaggerated, or fabricated is irrelevant to one fact. The United States government treated him as a threat serious enough to monitor, harass, and ultimately confront with lethal force. A man. For writing a book, The Naked Ape Desmond Morris. In 1967, zoologist Desmond Morris applied animal behavior science to human beings, arguing that humans were driven by the same primal instincts as other primates: aggression, sexual competition, territorial impulse. Stripped of its polite framing, the book argued that civilization was a thin coat of paint over millions of years of animal wiring. It was banned in several U.S. school districts. Religious groups campaigned for its removal. Libraries pulled it quietly. Not because it was false, but because it was uncomfortable. Because it suggested that the values we were taught to treat as divine were, at their root, biological. Ideas that reframe human nature at a fundamental level are consistently suppressed. Not always by governments, sometimes by communities, institutions, and social pressure so consistent it functions like a band. The population bomb. Paul Ehrlich. In 1968, Stanford biologist Paul Ehrlich published a book predicting mass famine and civilizational collapse, driven by unchecked population growth. It was a bestseller, and then it became a cautionary tale about expert overreach when its most dire predictions didn't materialize on schedule. But the suppression here is more subtle. Ehrlich's core argument that unlimited growth on a finite planet produces collapse was not disproven. It was delegitimized. His predictions made him mockable. And by making him mockable, the broader conversation about resource limits, corporate expansion, and ecological overshoot became harder to have publicly. Books don't always get burned. Sometimes they get laughed off the stage while the problems they describe continue to grow. The Franklin cover-up. John DeCamp. Former Nebraska State Senator John DeCamp published a documented account of an alleged child abuse network with reported connections to political figures in Washington, D.C. His sources included testimony from a congressional investigation. A grand jury was convened. A documentary based on the case was produced by the BBC and then quietly pulled before broadcast. DeCamp was a Republican, a veteran, a former colleague of CIA Director William Colby. He was not a fringe figure. His book was suppressed not through government action but through the more effective American method: legal threats, media silence, and the social cost of being seen touching the subject at all. Classified woman Sybil Edmonds. Sybil Edmonds was an FBI translator who, after September 11, reported evidence of intelligence failures, foreign influence operations, and what she described as deliberate obstruction within the Bureau. She was fired. She was subjected to a rare state secrets privilege gag order, one of the broadest in American legal history, barring her from discussing nearly everything she had witnessed. She published her memoir anyway. It was released without a single mainstream review. No major outlet covered it. The gag order remained in place. A government employee who tried to tell the truth. A book that documented that attempt. And a silence so complete that most Americans have never heard her name.